Hi there, short film fans, and welcome to the Cameo Launch Short Film Showcase. I'm Nigel Morgan, and this episode we're talking to the creative team behind the brilliant alternate history comedy Paul is Dead. For those that don't know, this short film is based on the conspiracy theory that posits that Paul McCartney died decades ago and was replaced by a lookalike who's been posing as him ever since. The film places this event in a cabin in the Lake District in 1967, where after a booze and drug-fueled night, the feuding Beatles wake up to find Paul dead. Contemplating what this means for their future, they happen across local farmer Billy Shears, a dead ringer for Paul McCartney and gifted vocalist. This film is not only funny and quirky, but is stylistically inspired and fully committed to its characters. Our full review, as given by Cameo Launch's own Paul McCartney, George Mole, is available to watch right now at cameolaunch.com/reviews and can also be found on our Instagram and YouTube channel. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and hit all the appropriate bells. Now, I got to sit down with the film's writers, Stuart Armstrong and Ben Bovington-Key, and co-writer and director, George Moore. We talk about the film's origins, the challenges of shooting a period film in rural England, and capturing the essence of arguably the most iconic group in music history. Kick back and enjoy. Welcome to the Cameo Launch Short Film Podcast. Today, joining us to talk about the film Paul is Dead are writers Stuart Armstrong, Ben Bovington-Key, and writer-director George Moore. Guys, welcome to the podcast and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, man.
Cheers.
Yeah, it was really, really cool coming across this film. It was literally something that kind of popped up. I think you made it, what was it, about 3 years ago? Something like that?
Yeah, it was 3 years ago in February that we shot it, and it came out in August.
And yeah, I mean, because stylistically, it's very different to a lot of the types of films you see. And I do sort of remember vaguely the sort of urban myth that the premise of the film is based on about Paul McCartney being a lookalike for the past however many decades. And I just thought it just sounded like straight off the bat to be a really interesting concept and just immediately lends itself to comedy and obviously delivered on the comedy promised. So what was it that kind of led you to that idea in the first place, and how did you find each other and decide to collaborate on it?
Well, I mean, it is, as you said, really. We kind of, Ben was telling me about the conspiracy theory. I'd not heard it before. And I'm a big kind of conspiracy theory fan in purely an entertainment sense. And yeah, it was in a kind of drunk taxi ride home after a night out. And he told me this thing. And as you always do, you say, oh, that would make a great movie, you know, as an offhand comment. But then the next day we got up and we started writing it. And yeah, it just seemed to work really well as a comedy, as a little sort of short film piece. And yeah, it was a great opportunity to use the style, as you said, and to make a kind of fun period piece with a good sort of ensemble cast.
Stuart and Ben, as your primary roles being writers on this particular film, how did you come to start working together primarily, and how did that also lead to collaboration with George?
Well, Ben and I didn't actually ever work together on the writing process for this film, weirdly. Ben and George started writing the film, and then I think Ben had to jump on a different project. And me and George sort of finished it off, polished the script up, which was quite a funny way to work as co-writers. But I think it sort of worked.
And that, for the record, is not how I remember it at all. Like, not that I really remember the process much, but yeah, I mean, since then we're writing on a few other projects at the moment, and the process changed each time. Really, I mean, it's a funny one working with three people. It's quite good for comedy because if you're writing by yourself and trying to come up with jokes, you don't know if they're immediately funny. It's up to you whether you think they're funny or not. But if you're in a room and you shout a joke out loud, if someone else laughs, if two other people laugh, brilliant. You know, it's going in, which you don't get by working with yourself. So it is great to just be in a room with all three of us when we get a chance, and just to sort of pace around and sort of throw out gags and stuff.
No, absolutely. So, Ben, so you left at a certain point to work on another project. About what stage was the writing process at when you moved on to the other project?
So we just we'd like hashed out the idea, as you say, in the cab, and when we got back, it was just about trying to figure out the structure of what this film would be. And we talked about other references that we wanted to get in there, and there's like a key reference to films like With Nell and I and stuff, and
trying to figure out what the journey of it would be, and we formulated the kind of plan that it would be up the mountain and like following them on this kind of quest to bury their friend. And I think we'd gotten through probably like a draft and a half or something, and then I had to drop out because I was writing and directing another film, and my responsibilities became more on that. And that's when Stu came in, and these guys polished it off and made it as great as it was.
It's just a great job all round, just in terms of its ambition, if nothing else. Was there any conversations between you three of you at any point about the scope of taking on a retelling of some of like music and history's biggest figures at all?
So, I mean, there are elements of the conspiracy theory that we didn't manage to put into the short. The actual conspiracy theory has Paul dies in a car crash, and they stow him away and take him away, and then they replace him. We didn't have time to do that. We wanted to limit ourselves to a kind of a short sort of 15-minute structure. The fact that they were well-known characters was only a help throughout the whole thing. I mean, it helped draw an audience in. It meant that people kind of already knew the kind of character types, the archetypes that each of these people were meant to be anyway. You know, I mean, there was a point in early discussions where we were going, do we want to kind of take the kind of classic comedy version of the Beatles stereotype and turn it on its head and have Ringo be actually in charge behind closed doors and stuff? But we thought we didn't have time to do that. And yeah, it's just great to kind of show it to an audience that already know, you know, where you're going with it from the get-go, because it means you can do a lot more with the time that you've got in a short film.
And I think, and particularly in terms of the way John Lennon is portrayed, that sort of messianic complex is really dialed up to 11 on this one. And I think when they discover that that Paul's dead, and his immediate thought is to go to our careers are over, as opposed to our friend and collaborator is dead. Was there much discussion in terms of how much to kind of embellish the established sort of character dynamics, or did you throw in additional characteristics to serve the comedy and the story that you come up with?
Well, one thing we talked a lot about is characters embodying conflict, and the idea that John Lennon is known for being the sort of global symbol of peace and love, but behind closed doors, perhaps he is this sort of neurotic, self-obsessed, egotistical maniac. Our version of John, that is. And George Harrison, is this spiritual sort of leader in the 60s, but actually he's very materialistic and like, oh, you fucked my sitar, dude. And that's all he cares about.
Yeah, I mean, it was all about the conflict is the driver of the thing. The humor as well comes out of the different characters clashing, the different kind of goals. So each of the characters has a clear kind of motive throughout the thing. It's John's is to just get Billy involved and get back on track with the band. George's is to kind of do Paul justice and take him up the mountain, if only to kind of remove any sort of guilt for being responsible for his death. And Ringo's is to just find a bit of peace and quiet and kind of stop everyone fighting. And I think that's a good way to start, really. When you're starting with a film, or when you're starting with comedy, you've got to start with your characters, really, and know where their motivation is from the get-go. Because that will inform the conflict that you have going forwards, and it'll inform what happens in each character's arc and each character's story. I mean, there wasn't really much time in a short film to complete a character arc for 3 or 4 characters, So, I mean, you've got to have it quite clear and quite signposted to the audience as well.
There's a sort of semi-parallel here in that you're writing a story about a group of artists working together while also being a group of artists working together. Did you find that sort of parallel helped in terms of establishing the dynamics between those characters, and did that feed the comedy at all?
I don't know. I've always enjoyed working as a team like that. There are always difficulties, like working in a team, but like we were all kind of learning and working together. And I think, as George was saying earlier, writing these things as a group where you can throw out ideas and really know that they're working really helps. And it was just always clear that like we were a very small crew going up there, everyone chipped in and worked together. Like, it's not like one person can only do one thing. Like we've got to get it done in a short amount of time. and really all hands on deck. And I think it was just a great team effort that worked out well.
Yeah, we didn't have time for egos really on set because I mean a lot of people don't know that. I mean, this was our graduate film. This was a student film that we made, and so it was a tiny scale production with no real budget to it. But thankfully there weren't any egos. Everyone was lovely. You know, we had a lot of setbacks. Just practically, we had a lot of setbacks on set, but you know, nobody died. So the dynamic in the film doesn't necessarily mirror, you know, our dynamic as writers.
That's an interesting point because I mean, on a film set, ultimately you do kind of have to knuckle down and work together. You're filming on a mountain at the end of the day, and a period film at that. What were some of the biggest challenges of handling that logistically, and was it easy to maintain both the energy between the actors and also the tone you were trying to strike while dealing with those challenges?
Well, it was very sunny in the film, so it looks like we shot it in the summer, but it was the middle of February, and it was bloody freezing. We were in the middle of nowhere. The location was, you know, halfway up a dirt track through a sort of river, you know. So just practically, it was quite a tough thing. The period concerns, we were lucky enough to find sort of a holiday cottage that hasn't been touched since the 60s, quite frankly. So that was great. The kind of the design was already done for us a lot of there. Stu also art directed the film as well as wrote it, so I'm sure he'll have some other sort of horror stories that I can't remember.
Sure. I mean, we talked a lot about the world the Beatles come from is the sort of psychedelic, colourful world of London in the 60s. But the world that they're inhabiting in this film is this sort of backwards version of the Lake District, where it's not the 60s, it's like the 1940s or like 30 years earlier. So when we came to finding locations, we had this sort of dank holiday cottage up on a mountain that hasn't been touched since the 60s, and we just sort of threw a bunch of hippie stuff at it, and it sort of landed. And the pub we filmed in as well, it's like the highest pub above sea level in England or something. Really, really remote place. Oh, wow. And on the day we went there, we got there and we were like, okay, this is perfect, but we need to like strip it back. We need to take all these cushions off the bench seats, blah, 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 blah. And the guy, the landlord, sort of used it as an opportunity to kind of paint the seats as we were filming. So we had this like stripped back version of the pub, which was brilliant.
For any filmmakers listening, when you get a location and you want it to be as dirty and sort of grotty as you found it, make sure the location owners know that, because I've heard many horror stories about people going, "Oh, this place is great. It's really rusty or whatever." And then they get there and they've been like, "Great news! Because we knew you were filming today, we've managed to have a new paint job done." So yeah, make sure you avoid that. And of course, the big disaster that happened. Thankfully, we'd already got the film in the can, but it started snowing on the last day, and our location and accommodation was halfway up the mountain, and yeah, we got snowed in for, I think it was 5 days. I can't quite remember. It was all a bit of a blur.
Yeah,
it felt months. You know, first couple of days it was fun. Okay, we're trapped in. It's fine. It was snowing. We can go outside, and then we all started to get a bit of cabin fever, and it just, you know.
But we started writing a horror film while we're in there, because we were like, "Oh, we're stuck."
I was going to say that's a perfect opportunity, right?
Yeah, we were like, "Oh, we're stuck in a cabin in the winter, like up a hill. Like, we better start filming something because we've got all this camera equipment and actors here. We might as well." And then it instantly freaked us out, and we started just the idea of writing it. So we bailed on that one pretty quick.
Someone wrote "Red Rum" on the mirror in the bathroom.
Amazing,
we stopped that immediately.
Amazing. So basically, you finish making comedy and then immediately have to live through The Shining.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! That definitely needs to go in the making of. I think a big part of what makes the film work, obviously, is the cast. So, can you talk us through the casting process and how you found your own Fab Four?
Took a really long time. We just looked through thousands of people to find, people that could do it, that wanted to do a low budget short, that looked right, and most importantly understood the comedy, because that was vital. It was getting people that knew what we were doing with it, and that it wasn't a sort of a oh, we're just going to do a really silly sort of hammy take on it, and we're not going to go totally sort of dramatic. So it was about managing the tone, and also just casting types that could on set embody the sort of the dynamic between the guys.
Right.
Which was, yeah, I mean, it worked out great. The guys in that film are fantastic for that short.
Yeah, I think for me, Reed Anderson's John Lennon probably got the most amount of laughs out of me. Is just it kind of for the reasons you were talking about previously, in that John Lennon is kind of known as being sort of a representative or an ambassador for peace and love, and he has some of the most amazingly scouse lines ever in in the film that just really made me crack. I mean, I lived in Liverpool for a while, and it just kind of made me think of going back there, and it's just brilliant.
Oh, that's great that it sort of feels accurate. I mean, he's the sort of antagonist of the film, really. If the film has a villain, he is kind of a sort of just a sort of obstacle for everyone to overcome throughout the thing. So it was really fun to create a character where you could just be as nasty as possible with it, because villains are fun to watch, fun to write, fun to act. So it all worked out quite well with that.
And of course, Reed is a musician from Liverpool as well.
Oh, right, okay.
The song that plays over the credits was written by Reed for the film. It's the song that Billy's playing in the pub as well.
Right.
And we also had basically we're living with a John Lennon in the cabin, and he was playing songs at night, and like just created a real, like, I don't know, family dynamic having our own John Lennon with us.
They kind of all, because they'd be hanging around, they'd still have the fake moustaches on or whatever, or their hair done up in the particular way, or bits of costume lying about, bits of the actual Beatles guitars hanging about. And there were evenings where we obviously haven't got any Wi-Fi or anything, so they're sitting around playing Beatles songs, and it was kind of surreal sitting there going, okay, we're just now hanging out with them on holiday. That was quite a treat, really.
One of the things about making a short film is it usually needs to be augmented with other things, and it sometimes helps to have it augmented with other forms of video or film. How much have those additional experiences, either be they music videos or any other kind of work, how much has that kind of fed into any creative projects that you've decided to push forward?
I think music videos are a really good one for directors to do if they're just starting out and doing a couple of shorts, because what it allows you to do is something new, every job. So every time you do a different music video, if the concept's different enough, you're using different skill sets, you're working with different types of design, different aesthetics, different types of location. So each time you do it, you're building up your skill set as a director, which you can then bring on to a short film. So I mean, without the past few years of doing music videos, the short that I'm about to do in August would be a much more of a challenge, because I wouldn't have a lot of the connections that I'm using to make that short if I hadn't done the music videos.
Right. And there's, because even with this film having come first, I mean, there's a very clear visual style applied to it. Was it essentially to evoke that 60s feel and the sort of home film or home video aesthetic of that time frame, or what were some of the aspirations behind that?
It was. I mean, it was the closest reference were the very early music videos that the Beatles put out. So in 67, 68, music videos were starting to become more of a common thing when bands couldn't play on TV shows. So they'd make one film with a track and send it out to different TV channels that would all air this thing. And if you look at the videos for Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, especially those two, which are out of the Sergeant Pepper sessions, those were our main reference for the look of the thing. And there are shots that you'll see in Paul is Dead. If you watch those music videos, you'll see shots that we've recreated. And there was other things that we shot. There are lots of deleted scenes from this short that didn't make it into the edit. But there are more things that we shot that we replicated from those music videos as well that didn't make it in.
Right. Because just the aspect ratio alone has got to change how you would block a scene, how you frame any given shot. What were some of the considerations you had to take into account with the visual style that you decided to employ?
I think it worked very well. The 4:3 aspect ratio worked really well for the fact that we were going up and down a mountain, because you're playing with height rather than a wide landscape. And when you've got 4 people stood next to each other, they're all quite tall guys, and so it works perfectly framing for 4 people stood together carrying a body or whatever up a mountain. And I think colour was a huge part of the film. I mean, Stu will talk about the kind of art direction and bringing as much sort of bright colour and sort of psychedelic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sort of juxtaposition of their world and this world that they've come to, and I think the weather helps a lot with that as well. They're like sort of blue, like bright blue sky that's behind them for a lot of the film. Is just it's really nice.
Yeah, it is very, very striking in the way that it's done. I mean, it obviously doesn't hurt that you got some amazing clear weather when doing the film itself. Obviously, prior to the snowing horror film that followed, but yeah, I mean, just little things like being able to take out the color a little bit, but also have like a beautiful shot of the sun in the sky. It plays nicely into some of the themes of friendship and having to contemplate the ending to something that you thought might go on forever and all that kind of thing. So, where do you feel the film lands in some of its key themes? Maybe Ben, do you want to lead this one as you kind of had to come back and watch the film after having left the writing process a bit earlier? Where do you think the film itself lands on some of those themes?
Well, I suppose it all came down to this dynamic between them, and the Beatles have this dynamic that you see in the interviews of them, and they're always bickering, and they feel like, I think the reason why audiences love them and really associate themselves with them is that they are just like a group of pals and you can imagine yourself bickering with your mates and stuff, and you could always see John having little digs at Ringo and stuff, and the dynamic between them was almost like a family, with Paul being like the caring mother, and when he's gone, they're left with this like angry, confused dad, and they're trying to comfort him, but he's lost as well, and just seeing that family dynamic trying to fix itself and mourning their friend, whilst also trying to figure out how they can carry on so that they don't fall apart. Because Paul was always, we saw like, he's the one that keeps them all together all the time. He's like, whenever they're bickering, he jumps in and fixes the problem in our fictionalized version of the Beatles. And I think that theme of, every friend group has a dynamic like that, and everyone plays a role. And it's just an interesting way of seeing how people can move through that loss and come out of it with a new dynamic and just restore that equilibrium within your group. I think that worked. The pathos was so important to make it not this just fast, wacky thing. It had to have that that meaningfulness at the end, and I think that's why it resonates with people.
Yeah, I mean, there were 3 films that we looked at in terms of the dynamic, and they were The Big Lebowski, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and Darjeeling Limited, because those films are, as well as being some of my favourite films, it's a great example of showing a sort of dynamic between 3 guys, sometimes in the sort of wake of loss or stress. But yeah, I mean, those were kind of really useful as a kind of benchmark for, okay, we can see that each person is playing a different part in a dynamic, and it changes by the end of the film.
And in terms of the look that gets crafted, and Stuart, you as being a key part of that, and being one of the writers as well, could you kind of see those themes being hit on as the film kind of progressed? And to what extent did you kind of feel directly a part of that, working with the actors for like costume fittings, as well as kind of seeing the film start to take shape?
I think costume is definitely a massive part of character. The sort of physical clothes that they're embodying, and obviously it helps them get into character as the Beatles when they're wearing the Beatles clothes.
One thing that comes to mind is John's jacket is a sort of, it's like a military sergeant jacket,
Yeah.
whatever. And that definitely feeds into his sort of confidence and his sort of I'm in charge sort of thing. And George's clothes, I mean, that was kind of researched as well. We spent a long time getting these clothes custom made.
Yeah, it was a long process costuming the film, because we wanted to recreate specific photos of the Beatles around that time, and find these specific pieces, a lot of which you can't find. We initially wanted to have John Lennon in this like psychedelic yellow Afghan jacket, but they just don't exist anymore without having one made for thousands of pounds. So we were rummaging through every sort of vintage bin in East London, trying to find these like perfect orange flares or this exact William Morris caftan, and we ended up having to have a lot of it made, to be honest. But I think it was really important to us getting the costumes just right.
That day when we did the costume fitting was really like, it was like the first time I think most of the cast had met each other properly. Yeah. And we did a costume fitting in the top of a pub in North London. And it was just like the characters came to life instantly, and they were all having banter, and we were like, oh, this is really it. We've got the Beatles together. We took some pictures, and then we all walked down to St Pancras Station, and they just started playing on the pianos there, and we just instantly saw how audiences react to the Beatles. Just like everyone loves it. And we just kind of got some footage of them playing some songs in the train station, and it was like, oh, okay, now we're making like a Beatles film. Like, it was really cool. So, and I think that's so down to the costume. Like, 4 normal guys turned up, went into a pub, and came out as the Beatles. It was mad. So,
wow.
Yeah, you can see it. I mean, when they put the jacket on, suddenly, the physicality changes. I mean, we were talking about when they animated Yellow Submarine. I can't quite remember the details, but the director gave the animators an instruction that each of them should walk differently when the animation walks like different. And I think it was like George has to walk like a cowboy, John has to walk like a circus ringmaster, Ringo walks like a schoolboy that's been turned off. I can't remember what Paul's one was. But we use things like that, and you can just see them come to life when they wear the thing, and they've got the makeup done and everything.
No, I mean, it is brilliant, and I think all of its individual components come together, and it's not just funny. I mean, the film has a ton of heart, particularly in that sort of moment of realization and catharsis at the top of the mountain. What are some of the things that you hope audiences take away from it? George, you want to take the lead on this one?
What do I think audience should take away from it? Firstly, I want it to be an entertaining film, and it seems to kind of deliver on that when it's played with audiences. In terms of a thematic sort of a message thing, I just hope that people can kind of, I guess, see a bit of their egos and kind of let it hit home, ground people a little bit in their friendship groups. But really, I want them to have a good time watching it and want to see more, really.
I'll tell you what I've heard a lot, and what I really like hearing, and what I think basically we were thinking going into this is that we wanted to make a film that we'd want to watch. And it's like, and I always find like a lot of the comedy films we watch are actually from about 10 years ago now. Like, I don't know, some of those really influential stuff like Hot Fuzz and stuff and things like that. And just really like, what would we want to watch right now? Like, and what are we into? Incorporate the music, the comedy, the visuals and we've had like a lot of people reach out and just be like, like I feel like this was made for me right now. I really wanted to watch something just like this, and I think that's what I enjoy hearing people take away from it. Is that's just the film that they wanted to watch in that moment, and it popped up. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many people making like British comedy in this sort of style these days. I mean, as you say, Ben, a lot of that stuff is from 10, 15 years ago. And I mean, I was trying to think the other day, I was looking through, okay, what comedies have people put out, in the past 10 years or 5 years? And you don't really get that many in the UK anymore, which is quite sad. There's a lot of comedy talent. It's all moved to TV, of course, but the features that come out, the only funny ones are their period films or their kids' movies, really, or their franchise movies that are spin-offs from TV shows like The In-Betweeners or something. You don't get people making these sort of British comedies in the style of things like With Nell and I, which is a great shame. But hopefully, there's a gap in the market for us a bit, and we've got plenty of ideas to make soon.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit about the project you've got coming up, or is that still quite secret at the moment?
Yeah, no, I can talk about the project we're coming up. It's a short film again. It's a long short film, and it's about a haunted nudist camp. So it's called Free Spirit, and it follows a main character who's a kind of fish out of water character. He's quite a bashful local village vicar who's kind of caught up in a sort of battle with the parish council and this nudist camp, and gets called to nudist camp to solve their poltergeist problem, which means they can't be naked anymore because they're being covered up by floating teapots and watering cans and things. So that's the general premise. In terms of what the film's about, it's about kind of opening up. He's quite a closed guy, he's lived quite a cloistered life. And it kind of shows someone just thrown into a completely new scenario and having to kind of readjust their mindset. Similar to Paul is Dead in how they react and reestablish their dynamic. It's about one person looking at themselves and going, have I been living my life to the fullest? Am I, where I want to be? And that's going to be loads of fun. There's lots of practical effects, lots of horror tropes. I mean, the biggest reference for this short is things like Evil Dead trilogy. So it's going to be loads of fun to make. And yeah, we're fundraising right now, so fingers crossed we can shoot it this summer and get it out in the autumn.
Amazing. Sounds fantastic. Please do keep us in the loop with that. And we'll be very, very excited to let people know what's going on with it once that's out there.
Cool.
But guys, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute blast talking to you.
Cheers,
well
man.
done and congratulations on this film. It is hilarious and it's also quite heartfelt, and the fact that you managed to pack 4 character arcs into a comedy that is just over 10 minutes long is an achievement in and of itself. So fantastic work. And we look forward to seeing more from you. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thank you once again to director and writer George Moore and writers Stuart Armstrong and Ben Bovington-Key. You can watch Paul is Dead right now on our cinema page, cameolaunch.com/cinema, and we've included a link to the film in the description. This is one among many films you can find on our cinema page. We've curated a collection of fantastic short films from across the cyberscape that you can watch for free. You can also rent premium short films from our featured short film lineup for 48 hours for a mere £1.49. And if that isn't value enough, you can subscribe to our featured short film lineup, which includes time travel adventure Recursion, historical epic The German King, and hilarious romantic comedy La Merde, all for £3.99 per month. Subscribing allows you to watch these films on demand for as long as they are on our platform. So head on over to cameolaunch.com/cinema and check all of that out. As always, you can grab cinematic merch from our online shop, including DVDs, Blu-rays, box sets, screenplays, and much more. Just head over to cameolaunch.com/shop to pick up a little something for the movie lover in your life. You can keep up to date with all things Cameo Launch by heading to our site, cameolaunch.com, and subscribing to our newsletter, and also by following us on the socials at Cameo Launch on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you haven't already, don't forget to head to cameolaunch.com/podcast, where you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and get notifications on brand new content by hitting that bell. Thank you once again for joining us. Have a fantastic bank holiday weekend, and we'll see you next time.